Hey everyone, in this video let's take a look at question 54, spiral matrix on Leetcode. This is part of our blind 75 list of questions, so let's begin. In this question we're given an m by n matrix and want to return all of the elements of the matrix in spiral order. Essentially in spiral order you start off at the top left hand side and then you go to the top right hand, then you go down to the bottom right hand, and then you go left to the bottom left hand, and then you go up, not to the same location, but because we already processed it, we go one location down, and then the cycle basically repeats. So, and then we just return like the spiral order in the very end. So on Paint, I have another variation here, so you can see, essentially we would do something like this. We'd go ahead and process this, and then we would go ahead and process this, and then we would work backwards, and we would process all of this, and then we'll go up again, process this. Notice how we're not going back to the start, but one level beneath that. And then we will essentially repeat the entire process again. And so you will continue doing this until you're out of bounds or you have completed your matrix. Okay, so this question is actually not so hard once you realize how we want to traverse, right? Because that's the entirety of the question. And if you really think about it, like what are the things that we're doing, right? We're doing 4 steps. We're going to the right, we're going down, we're going left, and we're going up. And if you think about it, when I'm going to the right, I'm not always going to the same location, right? Like for example, in the first time I'm doing it, I'm going to this column over here. The second time I'm going to this column. The third time I'm going to this column. So like the right hand side that I'm going, it seems to decrease, right? The column seems to decrease. Similarly, if you think about it, when I'm going down the rows, the first time I do it, I go to the last row. The second time I do it, I go to the second last row, and then the third last row, etc. And you can also see similarly that on the left-hand side, it's the same thing, right? So on the left-hand side, initially we go to the first column, but then the second time we'll go to the second column here, and then to the third column, etc. So if you kind of think about it, those are the things that are changing, right? So to kind of put that into code, we have a couple of variables that we might want to keep track of. And essentially what we can do is we can keep looping until I don't go out of bounds. So what might that look like? So what do the variables, what might the variables be? So in this case, first of all, let me go ahead and just rename this to grid. I like to keep this name grid. But you can kind of see that we have 4 sets of variables, right? So we have the variable that kind of controls like this starting row here, right? Which essentially like this left-hand side, it cannot like go over the starting row. And then we have this variable here which contains like the ending column, and you can see that when we're going to the right hand side we can never go like and reach the ending column. Then we have this variable here that contains the ending row, and if you think about it, when we're going down we can never go past the ending row. And then we kind of also have something like for the first column over here, like a starting column over here. And you can see that if we are going to the left hand side we can never go and touch the starting column. We'll always keep going inwards. So those are some variables that we kind of have. So how might we define these? So first of all, let's just go ahead and define the rows and the calls, which we always do, length of grid and length of grid at 0. So that's the rows, that's the calls of the matrix. Now we have a couple of variables. So the very top, we have our starting row, right? You can think of it as starting row, and this basically keeps going downwards, right? So we have our starting row, and let me just maybe define all of these. And so then we have starting column, and then ending row, and then ending column. Okay, so what is starting row? Well, starting row is a row that you start off from, and you go until the ending row. So if you kind of think about it, starting row to ending row, it will be from this row all the way to this row. So in that sense, kind of ending row here should actually be the last row, which is rows minus 1. And then similarly for starting column to ending column, you can kind of think of it as the starting column here, we go all the way till the ending column over here. So you can kind of think of that as starting column is 0, ending column is calls minus 1. And really, in order for us to keep looping or keep like going through our matrix in a spiral order, we must have that the starting row is less than or equal to the ending row, and the starting column is less than or equal to the ending column. So as long as we have this, we can continue to loop. But if we ever like go out of bounds, right? Like maybe let's say our array is like something like flat like this, right? Then if I keep going to the right hand side and then I actually go out of bounds, well, in this case, then I can go ahead and stop my my iteration, my for loop, or my while loop. And it works the same way in like all four directions. Maybe we go out of bounds here, go out of bounds here, etc. So that's how we can go about doing this question. Now, one thing I'll actually need to define is my result variable here, and I will just return result, I guess, in the very end, right? Now, what is the first thing I need to do? Okay, so I have all of this, and now let me go ahead and actually just remove all of this. Okay, so maybe I'll keep this. Okay, so what's the first thing we need to do? Well, first thing is we actually need to traverse the row, right? From the top left to the top right. So maybe I can do something like top left, top right. And how do we do that? Well, we know where to start off, right? Like we're starting off at the starting column. We're starting off at the starting column, which initially is this column over here. This is the starting column, and this is the ending column. And we're basically going to loop from here all the way to here. So what can I do? I can do something like for I in range. It will be for I in range starting column to ending column, but actually like +1, right? Because we actually want to touch the ending column. And so then I can add to res these values, which will simply be, well, what is the row? Well, the row will just be, I guess the row is like the starting row, right? The row is the starting row over here. So starting row. And then the column will be I. So we'll continue to do this. Now, what do we need to do after we're done this? Well, after we're done this, after we've went ahead and processed this, so maybe I can actually write my variables over here. So this I can say this is my starting row, and let me make this a little bit bigger. I'll just write it again. Starting row. This is my ending column. This is my starting column. And then this over here is my ending row. Ending row. If you think about this, after we're done processing this first row over here, then my starting column can move, or not my starting column, my starting row can essentially move down, right? Because we've already processed all of this. Okay, so we can go ahead and do that. So what can we do now? Well, now we can do from, well, we need to increase our starting row, right? So starting row plus equals 1. Okay, so now what do we need to do? Well, now we need to go from top right to bottom right. So we need to go down this path over here. Now you can see that since we put starting row over here, then we will just go ahead and we will loop from this location all the way downwards. So how can we do that? Well, for I in range, what will I start off at? Well, I'll start off at starting row. I will go till ending row +1. And then similarly, I will go ahead and add grid at what? Well, what do the rows mean? Well, the rows are I. What about the column? Well, you can see here that we're actually on the last column, the ending column. So here, ending column. And so that's basically it. Okay, so now what? So now we've processed the right-hand side and the left-hand side, or we've processed right and then we went down. Well, now if you think about it, this ending column over here, we can move this inwards, right? Because we've already processed this and then this. So we can move this ending column inwards. And now what do we have to do is we have to go from ending column all the way to starting column backwards. So how can we do that? Well, that will be, well, first of all, we need to decrease ending column by 1. And now we need to go from bottom right to bottom left. So how can we do that? We can do for I in range. This will be from the ending column all the way to the starting column. And I will essentially do, I think I need to do starting column -1 here and then -1. Right, starting column -1, so we actually consider the starting column. And so now, what will my res be? Well, if you think about it, my I here represents the row. So what is my row going to be? Well, my row is just the ending row, right? It is the last row. So I can keep that as ending row, and my column will remain at I. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've processed all of this, we've processed all of this, we've processed all of this. Now we want to essentially go up, right? Now we want to go up. Now, actually, you notice here that like when we are going up here, before that, we actually have to move the starting column inwards by 1 because we have already processed till this part over here. And so then all we have to do now is just go up from this ending row. Well, actually, it will be ending row -1, right? Because we have already processed this ending row. So it will be ending row -1. And then we will go to a starting row. And we also move the starting column inwards. And actually, the starting column inwards, I think it's already done. Okay, so it's not done. So we have to do it. So starting column, we'll move this inwards. And what else do we need to do? Well, we move the ending row upwards. Okay, so ending row, we decreased it by 1. And now you can essentially see here that we're modifying all 4 of these. And so now, what is the final thing we need to do? Final thing is from bottom right to top left. And so how can we do this? Well, it will be for I in range. What do we need to put? Well, it will be ending row, right? Because we decrease ending row, and then it'll go towards starting row. So it'll be ending row to starting row, ending row to starting row. And again, this will be in reverse, so I have to do -1 here. But then basically here it'll be res.append grid. And so what will my row be here? Row will be I. What about my column? Well, my column will actually be, it looks like it's actually still the starting column. So I think I need to leave starting column over here, and then I will move it inward by 1. So I will actually put this after this. And so this will be starting column, right? We need this because when we're going up, starting column is still over here. So we need to process this, and then we can move it inwards. So now you can see we've modified all 4 of these. And so essentially we will keep doing this until the condition breaks. Now, one of the things we actually have to check for is that the condition might break after any one of these, right? Like, for example, if the grid is just like one line or just like one dimensional, just, you know, one row, X amount of columns, well, then right after this, we'll go ahead and break, right? Like we can't even go down. We can't even do any of this. So what we can do is we can actually just check these conditions after all of the conditions here. So we can do if any of this is true, or maybe I can do if not this, then let's just go ahead and break. And we will do this for all of these. And I actually don't need it for the last one because after I do this, then I'll check the while condition anyways. But after we've done this, we should break if we break anything, and then we can return res in the very end. So let's go ahead and run this now to see if I've made any mistakes. Go ahead and run our sample test cases. I'll do it once more. And let's go ahead and submit it. And perfect, we can see it works. So what is the time here? Well, we're just going through the grid ones, right? So it's basically the length of the grid times the amount of columns. So it's O of n, m times n. And for the space, actually, we don't really have a space here. So just constant space. Okay, so that's this question. Thanks for watching.